Hi. The only physical sensation I have is the emptiness of my stomach. Even after eating, the feeling remains. As if someone removed it and it's no longer there. I am numb, without sensation, lone for the emptiness of my belly. Hi, I'm Ryan. I am a father. I'm a husband. Like Jeremy said, I'm director of experience design for Electronic Arts, the video game company. I'm a massive fan of Liverpool Football Club, and I wrote that in 2003, and that's the first time I've ever shared that with anyone. So, thank you. How I got here today. So 3 weeks ago was a conference in Lausanne, UX Lausanne. A few of you, I think, were there. A great little conference about user experience. And I saw Jeremy. We caught up and had a great conversation. I caught him up on 4 new events in my life. I'm going to be a father for the 3rd time. I'm loving my new job. I'm going back to Austin for the entire summer. And yes, we're moving back in October. His response was, congratulations. Hey, can you do Creative Mornings this month? We need somebody to help us out. Oh, and by the way, can you have your title and description by tomorrow? I said, okay, sure, yeah, I can do that.
That's not cool, right? That's not cool. We're supposed to do a great job here.
So I said, yeah, sure, I can do that. What's the topic? Revolution. Okay, sure, revolution. So if today goes bad, we know who to blame, right? We can blame Jeremy. But in all honesty, I want to thank you. The last few years here in Switzerland has been great, and thank you again for your friendship, and I'm honored and humbled to be here today. So let's go. Why does this keep happening to me? It's a statement many of us have probably said to ourselves over and over again at different points in our life. Usually it's a statement we make when we are stuck, when we're in a repeating cycle of or pattern of bad decision making and bad outcomes. We say this when we want to break this cycle, when we want new outcomes. And what we really want is sort of to identify purpose. I'm a designer, and design is really all about identifying core purpose. So today I'm going to talk about how in my own life I broke some cycles of bad behavior and bad decision making, using a little bit of history, a little bit of acting, a little bit of design, and a lot of depression. So design is a passion for me. I've been doing it for over 15 years now, making my living being a designer. But I never had any intent to be a designer or make a living. I never, when I was in 8th grade and filling out some form, checked that off the list, that's what I wanted to be. In fact, I've had lots of jobs in my life. I worked on a farm, I was a ski instructor, I did construction, I did customer service, I was a waiter, I was a bartender. I've had many different jobs, mostly because I have many different interests. That also kind of means I didn't have a lot of focus in what I was doing. So, the years were 1988, 1995, 2000, and 2003. These were very significant years because these were low points. These were clear, unmistakable moments in my life where I was not feeling good about myself, I was making bad decisions, and asking myself, why does this keep happening to me? Super depressed in all these years. These were moments where I was pretending to be somebody I wasn't out of fear I was going to become somebody I didn't want to be. Weird, right? Other people's satisfaction was greater than my own, and ultimately, I was also responsible for these moments because I was letting them happen. I was letting them happen again and again. So at the end of the day, I was really okay with it because I wasn't changing anything. I was essentially loitering through the game of life. So 2003 was the low point for sure. I was miserable, I was vulnerable, I was not really capable of really managing myself. I was frankly going to have a breakdown or a breakthrough. This was the 4th time in my life that I asked, why does this keep happening to me? At the time, my roommate asked if I wanted to participate in a weekend self-help seminar. Oh, are you kidding me? But I had nothing to lose at this point, so I said, sure, I'll sign up for this weekend seminar. And a very unexpected thing happened. During that, something I would have never imagined could happen. Somebody said something that just clicked with me. And the statement was, your mother is the way she is because your mother is the way she is. The first time I heard this, I'm going, what does this mean? What have I paid for? This is ridiculous. But what it really means, I'm going to say it again. Your mother is the way she is because your mother is the way she is. The statement really means that people in your life that behave a certain way and push your buttons do that again and again and again. And to expect them to act any differently or not to feel any differently is wrong. This is what the statement meant. And I was like, wow. By the way, this is being videotaped. If my mom sees this, it's not about you, Mom, at all. But what it got me to thinking was, okay, so I must be acting, I must be doing, I must be responding, I must be emoting the same thing over and over again. Why should I expect any different result? In fact, this is exactly what should be happening. But it also got me to thinking that, is that really true? So I studied history. I don't have a background in design. I never went to formal design school. I studied history. And throughout history, we see evidence of lots of revolutions where people break through and break cycles of behavior. What they were essentially doing was standing for something and using that manifesto to drive to a new agenda. So I was like, okay, that's great. All I have to do to create the life I want is to know what I stand for. Easy. I need to stop having these revolutions and have a revolution, right? So, I figured it out. But, I mean, come on. Who you are, what do you stand for? Are those easy questions really to answer, honestly? I had no idea. I was not prepared how to do that at all. But I knew I had to do it. So I started with things that I knew how to do within my experience that I could just start with. I had to start with something. So again, I studied history, and one of the great things I learned and developed while studying history was creating lists, writing things down. And there was a particular technique called connecting ideas. I don't know if anybody knows this, but it's essentially writing things down in chronological order, or writing things down where they're sort of connected. This is actually how I discovered music. I would find something that I liked, I would go to the liner notes, find the bands that they liked, and move on to the next band. So this is what I started doing. I simply started making a list and writing the things down that I did not like were going on. I started with emotions, how I was feeling. I then went back and figured out what was creating those emotions. And I really created two sides. I created negative and positive. But what I ended up having to do was really focus on the positive. And the result of that was my first manifesto. I've shared this with two people, so sorry, you're not the first. Every second, every minute, every hour of every day, I am letting go of the notion that I am unloved, and I am creating the possibility of being inspirational, creative, powerful beyond measure, loving, loved, fully expressed, awesome, brave, the sexiest and most attractive man alive, radiant, brilliant, honest, humorous, a no-holds-barred world champion wrestler who eats beans for breakfast and barriers for lunch, poetic, comfortable, passionate, awe-inspiring, spontaneous, touching, beautiful, alive, artistic, amazing, and most undoubtedly a true and real man. I have created and I am creating Ryan, and this is what I stand for. And that's a smiley face from my roommate. She got to see it at the time. Okay, so now I had something to start with. At the time, I was also a professional actor. I was living in Los Angeles, and I was designing to pay for food and rent, but I was trying to become a professional actor, and I had some success at that, but by no means was I doing well enough to that be my only job. And I liked it, but I wasn't really, I didn't have to do it. So I decided to switch, and I decided to concentrate solely on design. And admittedly, when I first started full-time doing design as my profession, my only profession, I wasn't very good. I don't know that any of us are really good when we first start, and I produced lots of things that were disappointments to me. They never quite lived up to my ideas, but I believed that I had good ideas. And now I had this manifesto. Before I had the manifesto, I would just stop. I would start a thing, and if it wasn't working the way I wanted to, I would just move on to the next thing and move on to the next thing. But instead, I had this piece of paper sitting up on my wall, and that forced me, looking at it every day, to say, don't stop, just keep going, keep doing. Depression is a funny thing. For many people, they can't eat, they can't talk. For me, it meant I didn't really want to go outside or talk to anybody. I just wanted to be left alone. But it also meant I was incredibly productive with my work. I would sit in front of the computer for days, for weeks, for months, essentially just doing and doing and doing and doing and producing lots of work and producing bad work and not so bad work, developing new techniques. If I was ever stuck, I would change the criteria a little bit. One of those criteria that I still use a lot today is time boxing. So essentially say, only give myself this amount of time, then I have to move on to the next thing. And that just forced me to let go and be comfortable with doing not so perfect work. I also took on a lot of work I had no right to take on, fully. I mentioned this background in acting. And when I was acting, I went to a school called the Groundlings in Los Angeles, which is an improv school. A little bit of trivia, one of my teachers at the time was Cheryl Hines. Does anybody know who Cheryl Hines is? She was not famous yet, but she was then Larry David's wife on Curb Your Enthusiasm. She's now on a show called Suburgatoria. Great, awesome. But in this class, she introduced a technique called yes and. Some of you might be familiar with this now, but Essentially, the technique in improv is that no matter what the person ahead of you says, you have to agree with it and then add on to it. And this is what created really spontaneous, things. So if somebody next to you said, chickens love to drive submarines, you'd have to say, yes, and cows love a Jeep. These types of things. And so I started doing that with my work. People would basically come, hey, you're a designer? Can you create me a website with a car that peels out and has smoke on it when you enter? Do you remember entering a website? And, in my head I'm going, what? But I would say, yes. And what type of car would you like? I had no idea. But then there was also other work that, again, I had no idea, which was, hey, you're a designer. I have this CD rack from Cost Plus that I really love, but it was $150. Do you think you could make that? Yeah, sure. What do you want, paint or stain? So I was simply just producing a lot of work, starting to get paid for that work, learning and really starting to love it. Just sort of this concept of doing was thrilling for me. And really it all started with this manifesto. It was on my wall. Every day I would pass it. I wouldn't read it every day, but I would see it. And reminded that that was the only thing I had to commit myself to that day, was adhering to that. That was my rule. We hear a lot of principles when we do design. Those were my principles. If I stay within that, I'll be okay. I've always felt like it's taken me a lot longer to do things than other people. I do things wrong all the time, as I've mentioned, but standing for something helps me to keep going. And it all started with a simple list and using techniques that I had used from my previous life to simply get me to write that list. Over the years, I've had several mini revolutions, not so dramatic as the one before, but it's essentially the same basic formula. Take things that you do in your life that work, that are successful, and I apply them to myself. There's all sorts of things in design that we do for customers, for clients, right? My job is to understand what people stand for and then design products and processes and services and whatnot for them while they maintain their own integrity. It's a big one, because that's really what they stand for. When I was a teenager, my dad asked what I wanted to be. I had no idea, so I answered, I just really want people to pay me to be me. Is that a job? And he joked around and said, yep, you're going to join the circus, you're going to be a clown. So many years later, I'm a designer, and I get paid to be me. How great is that, right? It's been 12 years since I've actually said that sentence, why does this keep happening to me? It's been a great 12 years. So long live revolutions, and find that something that you want to stand for, and that I think that'll be a place where you can then go if you're having this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ryan. It was a very nice talk. Thanks a lot. So now we have some time for questions. So if you have some questions, just raise your voice. Yeah, just say it. I cannot run this time.
When they called you to speak today, you didn't say, why does this keep happening to me?
Actually, he originally asked me in January, and he sent me the list. So Creative Mornings, they basically prepare their topics in advance. And I looked over the topics, and I was like, yeah, there's a couple in the fall that look good to me. Revolution was like, bottom of the list. It's like, I'm not part of any social movement. What, how am I going to talk about that? But a little bit, yeah. But not quite the same way. Cool. I mean, marriage, being a father. I mean, those are scary, but a different type of scary. We decided to. We've had several big moves, my wife and I, in our lives, and those have all been scary but exciting. We got married, and we were living in Los Angeles, but we got married somewhere else where her family lived. Came back to LA. As soon as the plane hit the ground, we looked at each other and we said, we have to move. 6 weeks later, we were living in Austin, Texas, and I was working for Apple, which I still to this day believe, like, they had, somehow I popped up on their list, but, I was not an Apple guy. I was not prepared for that. That was scary. Moving to Switzerland without knowing French, that was pretty scary, especially because we don't live in Geneva. We live outside of Morges in a small village where it is French, that's it. And, going to the grocery store for the first month, I arrived a month early and basically just buying peanut butter and jelly because I couldn't even read the package of, like, is this shampoo? Okay, peanut butter jelly, that's it. So those are scary things, but they're exciting. To Switzerland. So my first time in Switzerland, I had my 15th birthday. So I saved up my money and I came skiing for 10 days around Interlaken, so the whole Jungfrau region, and I fell in love. Told myself, one day I'm going to live here. Yeah, right. And a few years ago, my best friend, who happens to live in Switzerland, got married in Brittany. So we spent 2 weeks in France, but in Europe. And 2 weeks went all right. It was good. It was a good vibe. So my wife and I said, yeah, well, let's sort of investigate and see what happens. If it happens, it happens. It doesn't, it doesn't. So again, I just started kind of throwing out feelers, and then suddenly we're here. So it's, again, this philosophy of just saying, yeah, why not? It doesn't create the most comfortable moments, but it certainly gives us the adventure that we look for and we crave.
How did that happen that you wanted to be social again, like after a while? Like what made you be social and willing to see people again?
You mean like after depression? Yeah. So if you need to eat and make money, you kind of have to be social. And so I ended up starting that out with like clients. I'm also a massive music fan, so even in my lowest depression, I was still going out to watch music. That was like a getaway. So I wasn't completely sheltered, but I wasn't really into dating. I didn't want to meet anybody or really have close social connections. So eventually you start talking to people, you start working through client stuff and getting through these. But then I also met my wife, and it was random and an accident, and that helped too. Yeah.
How do you marry sticking to yourself on one side and the yes and theory on the other side?
So so the thing that is yourself is the and. So I get to add whatever I want onto it. I have to agree with what you've said, but I have total input from my own side to add what the and is. And that's where really having those words of artistic and humorous and all those things, I get to decide. It's also the case with my work professionally. So how many are designers, build things for other people? So you may relate, a lot of times people say, hey, I need this very specific thing. And you as a designer are going like, well, yeah, I could do that. But let's talk about what you expect as an outcome. Let's talk about your motivations and goals. And then as a designer, I'm going to select, because that's my job, but I'm going to give you the outcomes you want. It might not be the output you think you want, but it'll be the outcomes. So whether professionally or personally, I still get to maintain that with the and part. And through trial and error, doing it wrong many, many times, you find better ways to navigate that.
Could you tell us a little bit more about becoming a designer? Because as I understood, you don't have a degree.
No.
So I think that's kind of
Yeah.
revolutionary.
So I was always, I always painted, drew. When I was 17, I was deciding, do I go to art school? Do I become an architect? Or do I listen to my parents and become an engineer? My parents were in banking and finance. And so they loved that I drew and did those things, but then they gave me very practical knowledge, like your life as an architect is going to be very difficult. So I decided to be an engineer. I went to school originally to be an engineer, and I hated it, honestly. But I was also learning to code back in '92 with Fortran and Pascal and all these languages, because that's what I was studying. But I was always drawing. I was always making things just for my own reasons. My first job out of university, I worked for a record label, which was an electronic trance record label, and I was an event coordinator, which basically meant, Ryan, we need parties all over the world. Can you just set them up and then go? It's like, yeah, rad, right? So I was messing around and helping out with flyers and these types of things. So it wasn't like I came from scratch and wasn't designing. I just didn't go to art school and learn like golden ratio things when I was 20. I eventually discovered many of those things, but a lot of it has been reverse engineering a career, being willing to just see what others do, trial and error, see how it goes, and do that. I fully admit I'm not technically the best designer there is. I think what I bring to the game is a hybrid of knowing lots of little things and then how they combine together and work as a unit. So, cool. Thank you very much.